Hello, welcome back to another episode of Soul Sessions with Creative Mind. We are continuing our series on personality.
Yeah, and today we're talking about spiritual bypassing, the mask of spirituality.
We're going to talk about what is spiritual bypassing, how to recognize it in yourself, that it's actually a natural part of this living a spiritual life. So that's going to be a shocker.
You gave away the punchline.
But we're going to give you signs of spiritual bypassing and how to gain real traction in your spiritual growth and how to stop falling into the pitfalls of the bypassing so you can really make change and evolve in your life. So what is spiritual bypassing, Rob? How would you describe it?
Yeah, I'd say it's when the ego hijacks our spiritual work for its own agenda.
And what's the ego's agenda?
The ego's agenda is always to keep the status quo. Its reasoning is very simple. It says, if you've survived doing what you've been doing, even though you're not happy or you might even be miserable, it's worked for you to some extent because it's helped you survive.
Is it fair to say that the agenda is to avoid change? So if you're trying to grow spiritually, the ego will actually hijack the spiritual work for its own gain, basically to not get you to evolve. So it's kind of like sneaking inside, using your language to do that. It's really using spirituality as a defense mechanism.
Absolutely. And the ego is a master of defense mechanisms. That is maybe the definition of ego. The function, right? If you think of it as an app that we have in our mind, an application just like on your phone, its primary function is to help you survive, help you keep the status quo, stay where you're at because it's worked for you.
And we tend to make spiritual explanations for why things are tough in our life versus really facing the tough things. And you had mentioned, we talked about it being a natural part of spiritual life. What do you mean by that?
Right. So
it's natural, the spiritual bypass.
Absolutely, because we all start as ego, as persona. So in Jungian terms, the persona is the sense of self that we present to the world, and we say, this is who I am, right? It helps us kind of, for ourselves as well, kind of have that identity of, this is who I am, this is the role I play in life, or the different roles, right? The different aspects that we play.
So we like for me, when I first started learning spiritual work, I was this just ordinary person, and then I started reading self-help and going to spiritual retreats, and then thinking, "Wow, I'm a spiritual person now." I'm creating. So you create a spiritual persona as you start on the path. That's really the first step in any spiritual path.
Yeah, because there's no other way to do it. You can't go from being over-identified with the ego persona and then just jumping into all of a sudden you're a spiritual person. It's a process of transformation, like Jung would say. And that process requires us to first make all the mistakes, basically. Get all the mistakes out of the way. And spiritual bypassing is one of those, or probably the biggest mistake that we make.
Don't you think that, like for me, this how it played out for me is that I have this high achiever, need to be the best at everything, German, straight A student type of pattern and conditioning. So that conditioning, you're saying, is that as we take on that spiritual persona, our conditioning will actually play out our spiritual growth in the way that we've been conditioned. So for me, it was, I can't have to be perfect. I have to be the most intuitive person in the group. I have to, I was like competing with everyone to be the best, because in academia, that was my, really my reward is that getting the A, getting the best score. And so it's almost like you're scoring yourself on your spiritual growth and how you're doing. And then when I was falling backwards, I would be in these groups and I would kind of hide that I was kind of not acting in alignment with the teachings, and so that is sort of, you're fooling yourself. But that's sort of what happens, is that your ego has a pattern, and then whatever new thing we bring into our life, whether it's a business or spiritual development or a relationship, we're bringing in those old patterns into that.
Absolutely. So if you notice in most spiritual practices, the teaching or the teachings are saying, you're going to have to work with delusion. You're going to have to work with ego. You're going to have to work with anger, jealousy, all these things. They're not saying that because they know better and oh, poor you're just a lowly person and that's going to have to do this. They're saying that because that's what they had to go through to reach the summit of their spiritual work, essentially. You have to go through this. This is not an option. You can't go from identifying as a persona, ego, to really living a spiritual life. You have to undergo that process of dealing with your anger, dealing with your past conditioning, all that great stuff.
So what are some signs of spiritual bypassing? Well, you mentioned anger. You're not really angry.
Right.
Like the ego thinks of anger as something, and culturally in the shadow, we all have anger in our shadow because it's not acceptable to be angry all the time. Most people.
Or to express,
there's some people that are angry and they use that as their defense, as a persona. But for spiritual people, it's almost like a taboo to be angry. Like, don't lose your temper.
Yeah, and so that kind of false sense of peacefulness, of tranquility that we see sometimes people adopt as their persona, right? That they're very peaceful. They don't get flustered by anything. They're not angry at anyone. They can't allow themselves to be those things.
It's almost like then you're not spiritual. Like it doesn't fit into that persona.
That if you're angry, that if you're upset or passionate about something, that you're not spiritual.
And where does that come from? Because Jesus was angry at the tax collectors at the temple, and he was tossing the tables around, and just kind of like, this is not what I'm teaching here.
I know, it's almost, if you think of the cartoon version of a spiritual person.
The cartoon version.
That's the persona. Yeah, that's the persona, right? Jung mentions this in one of his writings. He says people will do the most ridiculous things to appear this way. They'll recite the scriptures. They'll wear beads and turbans and stand on their head. Whatever they have to do in order to avoid facing their real true selves, their shadow.
And we're talking about this in organized religion too, not just spiritual people that are exploring like different spiritual thought, and we're really talking about anyone who approaches God or the divine in a way that.
Yeah, you were in your book. You were mentioning Mother Teresa.
Yeah.
Kind of admitting in her writings that she had a lot of doubts.
But God forbid she puts it out there that she's doubting anything, because people would be shocked. It was almost like a hidden thing she had to hide. So this idea of bypassing would be, I'm sure she, she had the spiritual persona, but I don't know if she was bypassing in a way or.
Well, that's what I'm saying, that everyone has to go through it. It doesn't matter who you are, the Pope, Mother Teresa, the Dalai Lama. If you're genuine in your spiritual pursuits, you're going to have to go through this. This is not an option. This is not, let's say, this is not something that anybody is essentially doing wrong. It's part of the test. It's like you have to pass this test. Are you just going to create a spiritual persona, or are you genuinely going to go beyond that?
And face your shadow, and then go into the true spirituality, which has already been there. It's not something you have to manifest or evolve to. It's actually already there. Like, you're already enlightened. What we're really doing is taking away the part, or peeling behind the part of us that forgot that we're enlightened.
Yeah.
So another thing that I see, using spiritual superiority to hide insecurities. Yeah,
so if you think of some of the spiritual principles, right? it does imply that if you're doing spiritual work, you're kind of going up to the mountain and you're leaving the valley below. And some people use that to hide their insecurities by saying, I'm spiritual, I'm on a spiritual quest, therefore I can't get my hands dirty, I can't do hard work or get into the muck of life because it's below me.
Well, or thinking that I'm spiritual and I have all this knowledge, and then there's these minions in the world that are unenlightened, and that judgmentalness that you're projecting onto other people that are not as enlightened. And I've never done that. We all have done it. We think we're so superior because we have this higher knowledge, but when we're projecting and making someone less than us, that's your ego's just hijacking it.
That's right. And one of my favorites, which I used to use all the time, was this idea that you're detached from the world, right? Yeah. Because in a lot
when
of
I first
Eastern,
met you, that was the thing, right?
Yeah, detachment means that you don't care, you're not involved in the world, and really the literal translation is non-attachment, meaning you care and you're involved. It simply means that you're not working for the results of your actions, which is a very different interpretation than detachment, which means pushing away, rejecting, kind of not doing your part because you think you're spiritual. Yeah,
it's like that idea that using spiritual knowledge to avoid discipline and commitment and work. I see this a lot when I first started working in the coaching industry, and actually I was thinking this way, like, what's the easy way to make a business? I don't want to do all this marketing like normal people do. I'm a spiritual person and I have the powers of the universe. So let me just create something easy. Let me hold it in my mind. And I think the ego loved it because I didn't get anywhere, because I was waiting for some miracle to just save me, come in, and one day I'll be aligned and the money will just show up in my bank account, or the check will arrive in the mail, or and there is something to having the powers of the unlimited powers that are in the psyche. But the thing is, if you're acting from ego, you're not able to access them. So for me, I was acting spiritual, but I was waiting for that Christmas gift, or that kind of overnight success. And I really was actually using that spiritual knowledge to resist, like dealing with human problems, dealing with getting a business up, all those things. I mean, I still did it, but I just kept thinking, something's wrong. This is so hard. Things should be easy because I'm a spiritual person. I should be able to manifest quickly. And so I think those of you who are listening that are trying to build a business and you're very spiritual, you might be thinking, oh yeah, like there's nothing wrong with hard work. There's nothing wrong with having discipline. And then facing difficult situations, dealing with difficult family members, dealing with difficult people in your group, your service, people that you serve in your community. It's all, you can't lock people away and say, I don't want to deal with you. Because I'm spiritual and I like to surround myself in a bubble of calm. That's really the ego's defense to keep people away and keep you away from true intimacy. Another one is, which I think is huge, and this you brought to light for me when I first met you. We talked about the shadow. We talked about non-dual Eastern philosophy, is believing that spiritual practices, you have to be all light and all positive. Everything has to be good. There can't be any bad. There's no room for badness in spirit. Like spiritual people don't have like any emotion.
Right. What is it that Jung says?
He says, one doesn't become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious.
That's right. So he's stating it very clearly. It's not about positive thinking and just moving towards the light all the time. Actually, there's a lot more growth in moving towards the shadow, in moving towards what scares us, in moving towards the unsavory parts of ourselves. And that, like, I think when we have this spiritual persona, all of us, we want to be good. We want to feel enlightened. We don't want to look at the parts that are
not as brilliant or human, that kind of takes us down a peg, or that think about the shadow as things that are morally unacceptable to the persona. So if the ego's persona is the spiritual person, then what doesn't fit into that? And it's all different, because I think every culture, every spiritual discipline has the moral code. Sure. And so then we kind of play into that, like, oh, we're not allowed to do this. One of the biggest things I've seen with spiritual people, like spiritual business owners, is they feel guilty taking money, because they feel like it's not spiritual, that God give them a gift, or the universe give them a gift, and they should be giving that gift and helping everybody, and not charging any money, because it's like that's of the world. And, it's not, there's this sort of like conflict between the material world and the spiritual world. And the ego loves that. It's like, stay away from money. It's not good. And it's, again, like pushing away what is making money distasteful or success distasteful, that you should be just like walking the earth and helping people for free, with bare feet. And like Mother Teresa, she really gave up everything to do her work, which I'm not saying that's not a bad thing, but if everyone did it, it would, I don't know who would make money and pay the bills.
Well, the spiritual reality is that money is neutral, like everything in the world. It's neutral. It's us who give it this value of, we can use it to build bombs, or we can use it to build hospitals. It's our mind. And it's something we created. It's not like a given evil out in the world. So when it's interpreted in that respect, as if it is a power unto itself, that's idolatry already. That's kind of...
You're giving money power over God.
Yes, projecting the power out into these external forms. And but again, it's something that we have to trip on continuously so that we cultivate our spirituality. Every mistake that we make, every time we go down the dead end, we're learning to purify our awareness. Our consciousness becomes more itself.
And it's not that everyone should just not care and charge extraordinarily expensive things, because, money doesn't matter, so I'm just going to do that, and I shouldn't have any guilt. We want to regulate and say, is this fair? I mean, there's something about, ego wants fairness, and I think there's some elements of the ego that keeps us from doing very destructive things. So we want to make sure that we're in balance, and not just saying, I can't give you a price, tell me what you should charge. I see a lot of spiritual coaches say, just tell me what you can charge, and let's do a sliding scale, and it's like wanting to help everyone, and I love that. Kindness and generosity, but it doesn't help you because you're not able to pay your bills, and you're not able to do the things you want to do. Maybe you want to travel. Maybe your soul wants to experience more of something in life. But if you're not allowing yourself to receive and experience, like the resources that money can give you, can give you a chance to, go to another workshop for yourself, or hire a coach, or take a trip to Bali or to Tibet, and enrich your spiritual growth, and or reach more people by buying advertising. There's a lot of things you can do. So it's about being resourceful, and that we're always going to feel a little guilty, because we're just giving people, especially people that are coaches and any kind of service person, we do it because we want to serve. So there's that conflict that I love this already. Why should I charge? Like, it's like a weird thing. Like, but a car should, do they have a sliding scale for Volvos and Mercedes? No, it's like, you gotta pay.
Well, you got a lot to say about this, so we're gonna have to do a different podcast.
How spiritual people can make money. Well, I went through all of this. I went through all of this of that conflict, because all my friends were doing pro bono work, or taking, charging dirt cheap, and then they couldn't pay their bills. They were struggling, and it's like, how is this helping? How is this representing the divine if you're in lack, and you don't have the resources to take care of your family and all those things. And eventually you'll be exhausted. Or you take another job and work in a day job and do your spiritual work on the weekends. Imagine if you can make it your full-time job, So there's a lot there. But the bypassing itself will say, you can't take, the ego doesn't want you to be successful. It wants you to stay where you are. So it's going to use your spiritual knowledge and your spiritual words to say, oh, that's not a good thing.
Yeah, another one that comes up is when we teach about Maya, kind of this illusory nature of the world. Often people take that, let's say when we've been in spiritual bypassing, or we see other people kind of adopt that spiritual bypassing, they take it as, oh, if it's not real, that means I can do anything, right? I can just forget about...
It's not good or bad, so I could just,
forget about the external reality and not focus on that.
Oh,
but that's not really what it means. What it means is that it's inviting us to see this external world, this manifested universe, as the divine itself. In other words, there is no difference between the appearance, the things that we see in the universe, and the essence of it, which is consciousness. It is the identical thing. It's simply saying the appearance is showing you that it is consciousness. Because if you think it's a material substance separate from awareness, then you're in delusion.
So the divine is in everything material. And so it's about connecting, not rejecting the world and saying, there's another place I'm going to go that's better, and it's not terrible like this terrible world. I'm going to go to heaven or this other plane of consciousness that it doesn't have these problems. Like, we're in this beautiful miracle that we are in every day.
That's right.
Yeah. So, but the ego will make it wrong. It'll always try to make it wrong. So, to wrap up, how do we gain real spiritual traction? Like, what can someone do to, when they fall into spiritual bypassing? Like I said, we all do. It's a natural part of growth and evolution. One of the things I say, and you talk about a lot, is this idea of staying committed to one method. And there's so much out there on the internet right now where everyone's just like picking and choosing their little smorgasbord of personal development. And I know I did that for a while. And what we're doing is that shallow holes.
Yeah, so the idea is if you want to dig a well, you have to dig deep and you have to stay focused in one specific area to get to the water. Changing methods, changing paths, changing religions or spiritual practices is like digging shallow holes. You start in one place and you get to the hard part and you quit. You say,
that's the spiritual bypassing.
Yeah, this is too hard. It requires sacrifice, discipline, focus.
It's uncomfortable.
It's uncomfortable. I'm going to go to the next one.
And the ego goes, this isn't for us.
Yeah.
Ooh, look at this one. It says I can go for a weekend and be enlightened in one day, just 1 hour, clear everything. And then your ego's like, yeah, that's really cool. So let's do that.
Yeah. So the way to counteract that is to stay focused. Choose one path, one method. The Upanishads say all methods lead to that same truth, but the paths are called by many different names, and that's the reality, right? There are many different paths, many different ways to get to the mountaintop, but if you're always switching, changing, then you never get there. But if you stay focused and stay on that same path, even when it gets uncomfortable and difficult, then you'll reach the top.
And here's to continue with your mountaintop metaphor. If you try to do it on your own, there's a million divergent paths. And have you ever gone hiking? We did this once, remember, in New York, and we got totally lost. Or maybe it was Colorado, I can't remember. But there were bowls we approached. Remember that? And we were so we didn't have the right map, and we were trying to figure it out. And it took us forever to get back to our car, and it was just like the wrong way. Had we had a guide, that guide will tell us keep walking or face the bulls or take this route versus that route. And a guide, someone who's already been in that path, who the path you chose and the method you chose is an expert in that path, will be able to take you there faster than you trying to. It's like we're all trying to go around avoiding the difficult part, and you keep ending up at that same wall over and over and over again. And the guide's going to be there when you face that wall again, and it's going to say, that's not a big wall. You can do this. This is how you climb that wall. This is how you break through that wall. And that guide will take you over that top. And for me, I just remember for anything that you want to change in your life, whether it's spiritual or a business or relationships, I find that when I was trying to do it myself, I was like so lost. I was like, I call rearranging the furniture. And the spiritual bypasser will say, well, I guess this wasn't meant for me. I wasn't meant to start a business. I wasn't meant to find love. I've heard that so many times. I wasn't meant to take this path. I'm going to take a break now, and I'm just going to ask my guides or my inner wisdom what's next. And you're kind of staying lost because you don't have someone to say what you're experiencing is normal. This is your ego. And calling you out on it. It's so hard when you're inside your own mind to break free. Don't you agree? Like it's because your ego disguises itself as this wise voice, like, hello, I have this incredible insight for you. You shouldn't be doing this anymore.
Yeah. It is a form of resistance to say, I'm going to do it on my own. And of course, we're all smart and we can study and we can learn on our own. But almost all traditions say you need a guide, you need a guru, you need a teacher, you need someone who is there for you, a mentor, right? Somebody to kind of hold your feet to the fire when the going gets tough, because the tendency is to quit, to run.
It is, and there's more reasons to quit than more reasons to keep going, and so beware of that, digging those shallow holes, and that voice pretending in a spiritual voice saying, it's just everything happens for a reason, and this isn't meant for you. It's not. This must not be the right time for you, and it'll find a way. The ego will find a way, and it'll even use signs. Like we talk about the symbolic life. It'll even use, ooh, that's a sign I shouldn't do that, or I saw a black cat cross the road, and you start getting into superstition, and then really going off the wrong track. So remember, your ego's designed to keep you the same. Whenever you make change, it's going to try to use spiritual bypassing, that mechanism in your psyche, to get you to stay stuck. And it'll seem so reasonable and so spiritual, the advice you're giving yourself, but it ends up costing you time and costing you your happiness eventually, because on the other side of all those challenges are really what you really want. So I really love this conversation. We have another one next week where we're going to end our series on personality, and we're going to talk about what does it mean to create the true personality. So if we're not the persona, how do we embody who we really are as our personality on the conscious level?
Yeah, we'll see what Jung has to say about that.
We'll see what Jung has to say. Thank you so much for joining us. And remember to watch out for that spiritual bypassing, and you'll be going straight to whatever goal you have. Take care. Bye-bye.